Okay, so here we are. We are going through the Bible in a year, and we're doing it in chunks. We're doing it in pieces. We say that we're on the bullet train going 230 miles an hour, just catching some glimpses along the way. But it's amazing what you can catch even going that fast, or we say 30,000 feet. So we're in the book of First Kings, bridging over into the book of Second Kings. And we've done some of that. If you go back, you'll see where we've done some of that. But Second Kings, really for us, it's going to begin in First Kings chapter 17. And here's what it's going to say. First Kings chapter 17. Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain for the next few years, except at my word." And then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, and he said, "Leave here and turn eastward and go hide in the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan. You'll drink from that brook. I've directed the ravens to supply you with food there." So he did what the Lord told him. He went to Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan, and he stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. So you have to go back a little bit further. Chapter 16, verse 29. In the 28th year of the king of Asa, king of Judah, you see, because in First Kings, we're looking at the kings of the north, the 10 kings, and we're looking at the kings of the south. There's a civil war, they're divided. And so in the 38th year of Asa, the king of Judah in the south, Ahab in the north, the son of Omri, became king of Israel. And he reigned in Samaria over Israel for 22 years. Ahab, the son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those who were before him. So he's a bad king. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, the king of the Sidonians, and he began to serve Baal and worship him. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria, and he also made Ashtoreth pole to arouse the anger of the Lord, God of Israel, more than the other kings before him. In Ahab's time, Hael of Bethel rebuilt Jericho. He laid his foundation at the cost of his firstborn son, and he set up the gates at the cost of his youngest son, in accordance with the word of the Lord spoken through Joshua, son of Nun. So we can get into that a little bit, but suffice it to say that Asa is ruling in the south, doing pretty good. Ahab is ruling in the north. And what happens is, to Ahab, this guy Elijah shows up. Elijah the Tishbite, that's all we know about him. Elijah the Tishbite, because he was from Tishbe in Gilead, said to Ahab, "As the Lord God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there'll be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except by my word." So what's going to happen is these bad kings, is the prophets are going to come in, and the prophets are going to try to steer them back to serving the Lord. And so as we go on, we find in chapter 18 sort of a well-known passage where Elijah and the prophets of Baal, they're challenged to one another. They're up there on Mount Carmel is the name of the place, and Elijah and these prophets of Baal, they get into this sort of contest, which God is going to answer us, which God is going to bring down fire and consume the sacrifice that's there. And of course, the God, the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth, the one who had sent Elijah, sends fire and consumes it. So the battle between Elijah and the prophets of Baal is just a picture of what's going on in the northern kingdom as well as the southern kingdom. Because the southern kingdom, they're doing a little bit better, but in the northern kingdom, doing bad. And so Elijah and the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel is just a picture of the conflict that's going on, the spiritual conflict between good and evil, the spiritual conflict between idols and God. And it happens in 1 Kings chapter 18 there with Elijah, and you see that God is still God. He's still the God that rules, but it's a picture of what's going on with the people through the land, through all of these kings that are living in the north and living in the south. The southern kings are doing relatively better. And so what Elijah does after the great victory up there on Mount Carmel, he gets all depressed. He goes into a cave and he's like, I'm the only one. And God said, no, I have 7,000 that haven't bowed their knee. But it becomes the story of Elisha. And it becomes the story of Ahab and these other northern kings who are rebelling against God, and the prophets are trying to talk them out of it, trying to tell them to get back to God. And you find all of these stories that go on all the way to the end, where you have Jehoshaphat, the king in the south. Jehoshaphat was the son of Asa, is what it says in chapter 22, the king of Judah, and the fourth king of Ahab. Jehoshaphat was 35 years old when he became king. He reigned in Jerusalem 25 years. His mother's name was Azubah, the son of Shilai. In everything, he followed the ways of his father Asa, and he didn't stray with them. He did what was right in the sight of the Lord. The high places, however, were not removed, and the people continued to offer sacrifices and incense there. Jehoshaphat was also at peace with the king of Israel. So they try to make some peace, the king of the north and the king of the south, because they have some common enemies, and they try to make peace. And Jehoshaphat's doing pretty good, but he's got a little bit of compromise going on there. So you have the prophets, mostly, to the kings in the north, trying to get them back on track. The kings of the south doing relatively well, Asa and Jehoshaphat. And then that brings us to 2 Kings, the book of 2 Kings. What happens in the book of 2 Kings is you go from chapters 1 through chapter 8, and you have Elijah, and Elijah is taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire. Now, this will become significant as we move on. So just remember that Elijah was taken up, did not see death, and was taken up into heaven in this chariot of fire. When he's taken up, there's one of his students, one of his disciples, named Elisha. So Elijah, Elijah, and then Elisha, the disciple, Elisha, he gets the mantle. He gets what Elijah, puts on him, or God puts on him what Elijah had. So you're still, though, into the account of the prophets. And the prophets are trying to steer the king's hearts back to serving the Lord. And what you have actually is some amazing stories, some amazing miracles that happen with Elisha in chapters 1 through 8 of 2 Kings. And so then when you get to chapters 9 through 16, 2 Kings, we're going back and forth, up and down. Who are we talking to now? The kings of Israel, trying to get them back. The kings of Judah, some of them are doing good, some of them not doing so good, some of them doing better, some of them doing worse. We're going back and forth. They make some peace with the two kingdoms against common enemies. You find in chapter 17, finally the northern kingdom, because it just can't come back. They've just gone too far, too many idols, too many worshiping things that are not God, the maker of heaven and earth, the true and living God, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They turn away from him, they fall. So the southern kingdom goes on. You have King Josiah in chapter 22. Maybe we can see just a little bit about him. He does pretty good. You have King Hezekiah. You have Manasseh, who's a terrible, terrible king. This is a great thing about in chapter 22. Josiah was just 8 years old when he became king and ruled in Jerusalem 31 years. Gives the name of his mother. And he did what was right in the sight of the Lord. And in the 18th year, Josiah sent the secretary Shaphan to the temple, and he said, go up to Hilkiah the high priest and have him get ready the money. And anyway, what they do is they find the book of the law, because the Bible had been neglected. It had been put aside. And what it said in Deuteronomy was that the king was actually supposed to write out this, the Pentateuch, right? The first 5 books. He was supposed to write it out so that he would know it and remember it, and then he was to study it every single day. And so now the book of the law is found again, and Josiah restores the covenant, and still going on, war, enemies coming, and finally in chapters 24 and 25, Judah falls as well. So the northern kingdom, Israel falls. You get to chapters 24, 25. I think it's 24 and 25. Yeah, 24, 25. Jerusalem falls as well. So that's going to bring us into what's known as the exile, but there's a few more books before we get there, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. So sort of a little summary of 2nd Kings coming off of 1st Kings. So let's keep moving, and then as we move, we'll get into some of these pieces, and maybe we'll slow it down a little bit to see some other threads that run through the Bible. Hope it's making sense.